So one of the other things this offseason that was bolstered was definitely the offensive line, right? We re-signed Trent Williams to a massive contract to really lock down that left tackle. Alex Mack coming in from the Falcons to assure to get an all-pro level center, which we had been missing since Richburg had gone down with injury. Aaron Banks, being drafted, who seems to be penciled in as a starter at right guard. And, McGlinchey's still there. He seems like he's put on some weight. Tomlinson, who's an elite level, left guard. So the offensive line seems to be shaping up. What offensive line additions are you most excited about? And let's go through all of them and kind of talk about how you feel like this is going to make the offensive line better this upcoming season.
Yeah, so I actually just wrote about this yesterday for the Press Democrat. And, the 49ers went into the offseason and they made a lot of changes. They spent a lot of money and capital on that offensive line. They made big investments up there. They made Trent Williams the highest paid left tackle and then felt to bring him back. They brought in – that was their first move. Then they went out and they brought in Alex Mack. I think Alex Mack, that signing is probably the biggest of all the signings that they've made, because that's the position that really hurt them the most last year. That offensive line group is always – that's like they're the biggest guys on the field, but they're like ballerinas, and that everybody – it's all really well choreographed. They all need to know where everybody's going. And that center position is so important because he's the director. He's the quarterback or the director of that group. And when you watch the film from last year, there's a lot of times where guys are just missing their blocks. And I don't know. It seems to be like the calls just weren't where they were supposed to be. So guys weren't getting into the right spots. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that you had, as you mentioned earlier, there was no Richburg. And then we're going to have Ben Garland's going to be our starter. They go into training camp a couple days into camp. He's hurt. So now Brunskill, who's supposed to be a right guard, he gets shifted over to center. And he spends all training camp running at center. And then a week before the season starts, you bring in Ronas Grasu to play center, and you move Brunskill back to right guard. Right. And it's just this mess throughout the first half of the season until finally, they realize that Garland's hurt, so he can't play. Grasu's ineffective, so we're just going to go ahead and just ride with Daniel Brunskill. And it was just a mishmash all season long. So I think, adding, bringing back Williams, bringing in a guy like Alex Mack to really coordinate everything. He's going to be really good in the middle of the line. He's older, but he's only missed a couple of games over the last 6 years, which is huge. And then you put Aaron Banks in there at right guard, and Aaron Banks, he's I think what is he, 6'5", 338 pounds. He's definitely
a big boy. Big boy.
Yeah, he's not that normal right guard that you see for Kyle Shanahan, but he has the ability to pull left and right. He has the ability to work his way upfield and cut off linebackers in the running game. And then when you watch him in pass protection, he just dominates in pass protection, and that's going to be, I think, a big help for the quarterbacks and for Mike McGlinchey to have a guy of his ability inside of him.
Yeah, and I was speaking with Rich about this earlier. The one thing in 2019 that is kind of overlooked about the offensive line is there were no competitions for positions on that offensive line in 2019. Everybody knew who was going to play at each position, which I think is important because now instead of competing for who's going to start, you get to focus on continuity and really focus on how that offensive line is going to gel and make those type of moves and how you're going to adjust to different looks that you see with the defense and things of that nature. And especially with, we've talked about these offensive or off-season changes that are made through the NFLPA, and the group that is affected the most is definitely the offensive line because they don't get as much time to really work on that cohesion. And mix in their competitions between positions, it just makes that cohesion even less. So to go into this offseason with a pretty well-defined offensive line, knowing who the left tackle is going to be, who the left guard is going to be, who the center is going to be, who the right guard is going to be, who the right tackle is going to be, I think is going to be extremely important. Not only has the talent upgraded, but just the ability to focus and work on cohesiveness. A lot of those things that you talked about, missed reads and missed blocks and things of that nature, a lot of that I think is just going to be minimized just because they're going to be practicing together so much more than they have in the past. How do you think that is going to help the offensive line, and do you think that's going to play a major role overall?
Oh yeah, that's right along with what I was saying. I think if these guys are able, the only battle that I think we're going to see in training camp as far as the starting offensive line is, I think there might be Daniel Brunskill running at right guard for a little bit until Aaron Banks really gets his feet under him and takes the position. Very similar to what we talked about at the quarterback position, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those backups got to show that they're better than the starters in order to take the spot. And I think we're going to see that same thing at right guard, even though we all expect Aaron Banks to become the starter by the time week 1 hits. So I think what you said, everything you said was right on. I think they have a much more well-defined group. I think even their backups are pretty well-defined as to the roles, who's got what role, and kind of the roles that are up for grabs there are really only the swing tackle position. I think otherwise you pretty much know that Brunskill is going to be one of your guys that's going to be able to kind of play along everywhere on the offensive line, because he's done that already with the team. He's played every position except for left guard, and I think we might see him focusing a little bit more at center, so he can get more reps with calling the plays and working with Alex Mack, so that if something does happen, he's going to be a little bit better prepared. And then you've got Jalen Moore, who's going to be he's a swing tackle, who I think they're trying to develop to be the left guard of the future. And then the last position is going to come down to Sean Coleman and Colton McKivitz. And can McKivitz prove that he has the ability to play tackle? All we've seen of McKivitz so far really is him as a guard. But he played tackle in college, and I think that's the expectation is for him to compete for that position, and I think they're hoping he wins since he was the 5th-round draft pick.
Yeah, excellent. And, I know you talked a little bit about Alex Mack and his, what he can do, but I feel like nobody's really delved in real deep as far as having that captain of the offensive line at center, what he could do, and especially with young guys like Banks and McGlinchey still, even though he's been in the league for a while, still pretty young offensive lineman. What do you think he's going to bring leadership-wise, and also X's and O's wise? How is he going to just overall make that offensive line work better than it has, in previous years?
I just think that he's worked with Kyle Shanahan now on a couple of occasions. He worked with them in Cleveland in 2014, and he worked with them in Atlanta in 2016. So he understands. I think he has a really good feel and understanding for the Shanahan offense and what needs to be done. So I think he's going to definitely be an upgrade as far as he's going to be the coach on the field. He's going to be the guy who's able to help along in Aaron Banks and even Mike McGlinchey to a certain extent with making sure they know everything that's going on. And even on the other side, it's not like the left side of the offensive line was perfect last year. There was definitely some issues over there as well that I think can be improved upon. So again, having a guy like Mack, who's able to kind of tutor everybody and really be that coach on the field, is going to make Tomlinson and everybody else around him better.
Yeah, and I think one thing that was kind of lost when Joe Staley left is really having a leader on that offensive line. Obviously Trent Williams is an amazing player, probably one of the best left tackles in the game. However, as far as leadership-wise, he isn't necessarily known to be, the best leader. But Alex Mack is known to be a leader, and that I think that was something that can really hold together the offensive line, even if maybe there is some, let's say there are injuries that happen, God forbid. But I think having a presence like Alex Mack can keep that offensive line still playing in the right way, because they have that veteran leadership of an all-pro type player that people look up to in the league. So I think that's something that was missing as well. Not just X's and O's, but just the leadership overall. Having a guy like that really can replace what Joe Staley used to bring to that offensive line as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.